Admiral Day Wan stood at the command deck of Orbital Station Alpha and watched the dark shapes moving through space toward Earth. The alien ships looked big and scary, but Day Wan had seen much bigger and much scarier things in his 40 years of service. He touched the communication panel with one finger and spoke in a calm voice to the people waiting below on Earth. The Vorthak Empire had sent their invasion fleet just like they always did when they found a new world to conquer. They had done this 17 times before, and each time the people on those worlds had given up without much of a fight. The Vorthak leaders thought Earth would be the same. They thought humans were weak and stupid and easy to beat. Day One knew better than that. But he also knew that humans had worked very hard for 300 years to make sure aliens thought exactly that about them. Every human ship that went into space looked old and broken. Every human weapon looked simple and weak. Every human city looked small and poor. This was not an accident. This was the plan. Dr. Hye-jin sat in her office deep under the city of Seoul and listened to the alien messages that her computers had stolen from their ships. The Vorthak were talking to each other in their own language, but Hye-jin had learned that language when she was 12 years old. Most humans learned at least 6 alien languages in school now. The Vorthak did not know this. The alien commander was telling his soldiers that humans were just another weak species that would cry and beg when they saw the Vorthak weapons. He said humans probably lived in caves and hit things with sticks. He said this would be over in one day, and they could go home with another easy victory to tell their families about. Hye-jin smiled as she listened to this. She had been waiting her whole life to see what would happen when someone made the mistake the Vorthak were making right now. She touched her own communication panel and sent a message to President Bo-ram, who was waiting in the government building that most aliens thought was the most important place on Earth. It was not the most important place on Earth, but aliens were supposed to think that President Bo-ram received the message and nodded to herself. She had been president for 8 years, and this was the first time she would get to use the real power that came with her job. Most of the time, she spent her days pretending that Earth was struggling with simple problems like not having enough food or clean water or advanced technology. Earth had solved all of those problems 200 years ago, but aliens were not supposed to know that either. The Vorthak fleet moved closer to Earth and sent their standard message that they sent to every world they wanted to conquer. They told the humans to surrender now or be destroyed. They said resistance was useless. They said humans should be grateful that the Vorthak were willing to let some of them live as slaves if they gave up quickly enough. Bo-ram read this message and felt sad for the Vorthak because they really had no idea what they had just done. She looked at the response that her advisors had prepared. It was written in simple words that made humans sound scared and confused. It asked the Vorthak to please not hurt anyone and said that Earth would think about surrendering if the Vorthak promised to be nice to them. This message was sent back to the Vorthak fleet, and their commander laughed when he read it. He told his soldiers that humans were even weaker than he had thought. He ordered 3 of his scout ships to fly closer to Earth and fire warning shots at some of the human cities to scare them even more. Day-Wan watched the 3 Vorthak scout ships approach Earth and shook his head. He felt sorry for the aliens, but they had been warned. He pressed a button on his control panel that looked exactly like all the other buttons, but was actually connected to something much more important than the aliens would ever guess. Far below the Earth's surface in a place that did not officially exist, a machine that had been waiting patiently for 60 years suddenly came to life. This machine was about the size of a small building, and it could do things that would make the Vorthak's best scientists cry with confusion. The machine aimed itself at the middle Vorthak scout ship and fired a beam of energy that was completely invisible and made no sound at all. The Vorthak scout ship simply stopped existing. It did not explode or burn or break apart. One second it was flying toward Earth, and the next second there was just empty space where it used to be. The other 2 scout ships stopped moving, and their crews stared at the place where their friend's ship had been just a moment before. The Vorthak commander received confused reports from his remaining scout ships. His crews told him that one of their ships had vanished, but they could not explain how or why. They said there had been no visible weapons and no explosions. They said it looked like the ship had just been erased from reality. The commander decided that the humans must have hidden weapons that his ships had not detected. This made him angry instead of worried because he thought humans were trying to trick him. He sent a message to Earth demanding to know what kind of weapon had destroyed his scout ship. President Bo-ram received this message and showed it to her advisors. They all agreed that the Vorthak commander sounded more angry than scared. This meant he still did not understand what had really happened. Boram approved sending a second message to the aliens. This message said that Earth was sorry about the accident and that sometimes their old defense systems went off by themselves because human technology was so primitive and unreliable. The Vorthak commander read this message and became even more angry. He thought the humans were lying to him and treating him like he was stupid. He decided to teach them a lesson by destroying some of their cities with his big guns. He ordered 10 of his best warships to attack the largest human cities they could find. General Tae-hyun was waiting for exactly this moment in his command center that was hidden inside what looked like a mountain, but was actually something much more interesting. He had trained for this day for 25 years, and he knew exactly what to do. He sent orders to defense platforms that the Vorthak could not see because they were not where the aliens thought they were. The 10 Vorthak warships fired their most powerful weapons at cities like New York and London and Tokyo. These weapons could destroy entire mountains and turn lakes into steam. The aliens watched their weapons fly toward Earth and waited to see the big explosions that would make the humans surrender. Instead, they saw something that made no sense to them. The weapons reached the human cities and then simply stopped. They hung in the air above the buildings like they had forgotten how to move. Then they turned around and flew back toward the Vorthak ships that had fired them. The alien weapons struck their own ships and destroyed them instantly. The Vorthak commander stared at his screens and tried to understand what had just happened. His best ships had been destroyed by their own weapons. His crews were reporting that human cities were completely undamaged. Some of his officers were saying that the humans must have technology that could control alien weapons, but the commander refused to believe this. Dr. Hyejin listened to the confused conversations happening on the Vorthak ships and felt sorry for them. The aliens were trying so hard to understand what was happening, but their brains could not accept the truth. They had spent so many years winning easy battles against weak enemies that they could not imagine losing to anyone Admiral Dae-won received. A message from the real government of Earth asking if he wanted to end this situation quickly or let it continue a little longer to gather more information about Vorthak technology and psychology. Dae-won thought about this carefully and decided that the aliens had probably learned enough for now. He sent back a message saying that he would begin the standard escalation protocol. President Boram prepared to send the first real warning to the Vorthak fleet. This message would be different from the scared and confused messages that Earth had been sending before. This message would give the aliens one last chance to leave the solar system peacefully before Earth stopped pretending to be something it was not. The message was sent on frequencies that the Vorthak thought humans did not know how to use. It was written in perfect Vorthak language with grammar and vocabulary that only their best scholars were supposed to understand. The message was simple and polite, but every alien who read it would know that something had changed. The message said that Earth appreciated the Vorthak Empire's visit, but would prefer if they left now before there were any more accidents with the primitive human defense systems that sometimes worked in unexpected ways. The Vorthak commander read the message from Earth 3 times before he understood that humans had somehow learned his language perfectly. This should have been impossible because the Vorthak had never taught their language to any other species. He stared at the words on his screen and felt confused and angry. At the same time, General Tae-hyun received permission from Earth's real leaders to move to the second level of their response plan. He walked through corridors that existed in a place the aliens thought was just empty rock under a normal mountain. The walls around him were made of materials that did not exist anywhere else in the galaxy except in human space. Every surface showed information about the Vorthak fleet that the aliens did not know humans could possibly have. The general stopped at a control room where Captain So-young was waiting for her orders. So-young had been trained to pilot ships that the Vorthak would think were impossible, even if they saw them with their own eyes. She had also been trained to make those ships look like primitive human technology that barely worked. Today, she would get to do both of those things. So-young received her mission orders and smiled because she had been hoping for exactly this kind of assignment since she graduated from the academy 10 years ago. She would take a squadron of 12 human fighters and intercept the Vorthak ships that were moving toward Earth's outer defense perimeter. The aliens would see what looked like desperate humans flying old ships that should not be able to survive in space. The Vorthak commander was still trying to understand how humans had learned his language when his sensors detected small ships leaving Earth and flying toward his fleet. He ordered his officers to analyze the approaching human vessels and laughed when he saw the results. The human ships looked like they had been built from scrap metal and held together with hope. Their engines seemed too weak to push them through. Space and their weapons looked like toys. Commander Sung Min was flying the lead ship in So Young's squadron and listening to the Vorthak communications that his computer was intercepting and translating automatically. The aliens were making jokes about how pathetic human technology looked. They were betting on how quickly they could destroy all 12 human fighters. Some of them thought it would take less than 10 seconds. Sung Min activated weapons systems that were hidden inside what looked like a simple projectile launcher mounted on the front of his ship. The real weapon was something that the Vorthak had never seen before and would not understand even if they studied it for 100 years. It could reach through space and touch individual atoms inside enemy ships and convince those atoms to stop being part of those ships. The first Vorthak destroyer that Sung Min targeted simply fell apart as if someone had carefully taken it apart piece by piece and forgotten to put it back together. The alien crew had just enough time to send confused messages to their commander before their ship became a cloud of separate components floating in space. The crew survived because Sung Min had been careful to only disassemble the ship and not the people inside it. So Young targeted the second Vorthak destroyer with a weapon that looked like an old-fashioned missile, but was actually something much more interesting. The missile flew toward the alien ship very slowly, so the Vorthak would have time to see it coming and prepare their defenses. Their defensive systems activated and tried to shoot down the approaching missile, but their weapons passed right through it as if it was not really there. The missile reached the Vorthak destroyer and merged with its hull in a way that made the alien ship's computers think they were dreaming. Suddenly, every system on the destroyer belonged to So Young instead of to its original crew. She could see through their cameras and hear through their microphones and control their engines and weapons as if she was sitting in their command chair. So Young used the destroyer's own weapons to carefully disable its engines and life support systems without hurting anyone inside. Then she used their communication system to send a message to the rest of the Vorthak fleet. The message was a detailed technical analysis of their ship designs, with suggestions for improvements and a polite request that they consider leaving the solar system before more accidents happened. The third Vorthak destroyer was targeted by a pilot named Wu Jin, who had always been better at subtle approaches than his colleagues. His weapon looked like a simple laser beam, but actually created small tears in space-time that allowed him to reach inside the alien ship and rearrange things without damaging the hull. He carefully moved all of the destroyer's weapons to a storage room, and moved all of their food to the weapons bay, and moved their engine controls to the bathroom. The Vorthak crew spent 20 minutes trying to figure out why their ship had suddenly stopped making sense before they gave up and sent a surrender message to the human fleet. They said they did not understand what was happening, but they were willing to discuss terms if the humans would please stop doing impossible things to their ship. Dr. Hyejin was monitoring all Vorthak communications during this battle and taking notes on how the aliens were reacting to each demonstration of human capabilities. The psychological profiles she was building would be very useful for future encounters with species that made similar mistakes about human nature. She was particularly interested in how long it took each alien crew to stop trying to find logical explanations for what they were seeing. The Vorthak commander received reports from his 3 destroyed ships and felt something he had never felt before in any previous battle. The humans were not fighting like any enemy he had ever encountered. They were not trying to kill his people or destroy his ships in normal ways. Instead, they were demonstrating that they could do whatever they wanted to his fleet, whenever they felt like it. Admiral Daewon sent a message to the Vorthak commander offering to explain what had just happened if the aliens were interested in learning. The message included detailed video recordings of the battle from angles that should have been impossible for humans to record. The recording showed exactly how each human weapon had worked and included helpful diagrams explaining the scientific principles involved. The Vorthak commander studied these recordings with his best scientists and engineers, but none of them could understand the technology they were seeing. The weapons appeared to violate several fundamental laws of physics that the Vorthak thought were impossible to break. The humans seemed to have casual mastery over forces that Vorthak science said should not even exist. President Boram approved. The next phase of Earth's response plan, after consulting with leaders from the 47 other human worlds that the Vorthak did not know existed. The vote was unanimous that the aliens should be given one more chance to understand their situation before Earth revealed anything that might permanently damage their psychological well-being. General Tae-hyun authorized the activation of information, warfare protocols that had been developed specifically for species that refused to accept evidence that contradicted their assumptions about human capabilities. These protocols involved showing the aliens exactly how much humans actually knew about them and their empire and their technology and their plans. Every screen on every Vorthak ship suddenly displayed information that should have been impossible for humans to possess. Detailed maps of Vorthak space showing every planet and moon and asteroid base they had ever built. Complete technical specifications for every weapon and ship and defense system in their military. Personal files on every Vorthak officer, including their family histories and psychological profiles and secret fears. The information included records of conversations that Vorthak officers had held in private rooms on their own ships during this battle. It included their personal communications with their families back home. It included their medical records and their performance evaluations and their plans for what they wanted to do after this war was over. Most disturbing of all, the information included detailed plans for 17 different ways that humans could completely destroy the Vorthak Empire within the next 48 hours. Each plan was carefully explained with step-by-step instructions and estimated casualty figures and timelines showing exactly when each phase would be completed. The final piece of information was a simple message that appeared on every screen in the Vorthak fleet at the same time. The message said that humans had been watching the Vorthak Empire for 200 years and had detailed records of every world they had conquered and every species they had enslaved. The message explained that humans generally preferred not to interfere with other species unless those species became a threat to galactic peace. The message concluded by noting that the Vorthak attack on Earth represented exactly the kind of threat to galactic peace that humans had been hoping to avoid. It suggested that the Vorthak commander might want to consider alternative approaches to this situation before humans stopped being polite about protecting the galaxy from aggressive species. Commander Sungmin received new orders to escort the Vorthak fleet to a safe distance from Earth while they considered their response to this information. His squadron of 12 fighters suddenly became visible to Vorthak sensors as what they actually were instead of what they had been pretending to be. The Vorthak commander spent 3 hours staring at the information that humans had shown him before he finally accepted that it was all real. His science officers had verified that the technical specifications were accurate. His intelligence officers had confirmed that the personal files contained information that only Vorthak security services should have known. His communications officers had traced the signals and discovered that humans were somehow broadcasting from inside Vorthak computer systems. Captain So Young received orders to prepare for the next phase of the demonstration, while the Vorthak fleet remained motionless in space. The aliens had stopped all aggressive actions and were sending confused messages, asking for clarification about human intentions. So Young knew that this meant the psychological warfare phase was working exactly as planned. The Vorthak commander finally sent a message to Earth requesting negotiations. He said that his empire was willing to discuss terms for a peaceful resolution to this conflict. He also said that he was confused about human claims regarding other species and galactic protection because the Vorthak had never encountered any evidence that humans existed outside of Earth. President Boram read this message and felt sad for the Vorthak because they were about to learn something that would completely change how they understood the galaxy. She approved the release of historical records that humans had been keeping secret for 400 years. These records would show the Vorthak exactly how wrong they had been about almost everything. Dr. Hae-jin activated communication systems that connected Earth to human colonies and outposts and research stations scattered across thousands of star systems. The Vorthak fleet suddenly found itself receiving messages from places they had never heard of. Human voices spoke to them from worlds that were millions of light years away from Earth. Each message was time-stamped to show that the communications were happening in real time. The messages came from human settlements that had been established centuries before the Vorthak Empire even existed. They came from research stations hidden inside nebulae that the Vorthak had always thought were empty. They came from mining operations on asteroids in systems that Vorthak maps showed as uninhabited. They came from diplomatic outposts on worlds where other species lived without knowing that humans were quietly watching over them. Admiral Day-Wan coordinated the most important part of this revelation by connecting the Vorthak fleet to the real human government. This government was not located on Earth and was not led by President Bo-Ram. The real human government operated from a mobile command center that traveled between star systems and made decisions that affected the entire galaxy. The Vorthak commander found himself speaking directly to Chancellor Eun-jung, who had been governing human space for 30 years. Chancellor Eun-jung explained that Earth was just one of many human worlds, and that President Bo-Ram was just a local administrator who handled visitors and managed the illusion that humans were a primitive single-planet species. Chancellor Eun-jung told the Vorthak commander that humans had been aware of his empire since before it conquered its first world. She said that humans had been carefully monitoring Vorthak expansion and had detailed records of every battle and every conquered species. She explained that humans had been waiting to see if the Vorthak would eventually learn to coexist peacefully with other species, or if they would continue to be a threat. The Vorthak commander asked why humans had not intervened earlier if they disapproved of Vorthak expansion. Chancellor Eun-jung explained that humans preferred to let other species develop their own solutions to conflicts whenever possible. She said that intervention was reserved for situations where species posed existential threats to galactic stability, or where they attacked human interests directly. Engineer Wu Jin received authorization to show the Vorthak fleet what human interests actually looked like. He activated sensors that revealed the true scope of human presence in the galaxy. The aliens discovered that humans had hidden installations in virtually every star system they had ever visited. Human monitoring stations had been watching them for decades without being detected. The Vorthak learned that every world they had conquered already had human observers living among the native populations. These observers had been sending detailed reports about Vorthak occupation policies and treatment of conquered species. The reports painted a very unflattering picture of Vorthak civilization and had led to humans classifying the Empire as a potential threat to galactic peace. General Tai Hyun showed the Vorthak commander records of meetings where human leaders had debated whether to intervene in previous Vorthak conquests. The records showed that humans had come very close to stopping Vorthak expansion several times, but had decided to wait and see if the Empire would moderate its behavior voluntarily. The records also showed that humans had been secretly helping some of the species that the Vorthak had conquered. Human technology and human advisors had been provided to resistance movements on occupied worlds. Human intelligence had been shared with species that were threatened by Vorthak expansion. Human weapons had been given to governments that needed to defend themselves against Vorthak aggression. Commander Sung Min was ordered to escort Vorthak reconnaissance ships to several nearby star systems so they could verify human claims about galactic presence. The alien crews were amazed to discover massive human installations that had been invisible to their sensors. They found shipyards building vessels that dwarfed anything in Vorthak fleets. They found research stations conducting experiments that Vorthak science could not even understand. The most shocking discovery was a human diplomatic facility where representatives from dozens of species were meeting to discuss galactic affairs. Many of these species were unknown to the Vorthak despite their claims to have explored large portions of the galaxy. The aliens realized that there was an entire galactic community that existed beyond their knowledge, and that humans played a central role in managing it. Dr. Hai Jin noted that the Vorthak crews who visited these installations showed signs of severe psychological stress. Learning that their empire was actually a small and primitive part of a much larger galactic civilization was damaging their sense of identity and purpose. She recommended that future revelations be made more gradually to avoid permanent psychological harm. The Vorthak commander received a complete briefing on human galactic policy from Ambassador Kung Su, who had been managing relations with aggressive species for over 20 years. Ambassador Kyung-soo explained that humans had established a simple rule for galactic peace. Species were free to develop however they wanted, as long as they did not threaten other species or attempt to build empires through conquest. Ambassador Kyung-soo showed the Vorthak commander records of 12 other species that had made similar mistakes to the ones the Vorthak were making now. Some of those species had learned to coexist peacefully with their neighbors after humans intervened. Others had refused to change their behavior and had been permanently removed from the galaxy. The ambassador explained that humans preferred the first option, but were prepared to implement the second option if necessary. He said that the choice belonged entirely to the Vorthak, and that humans would respect whatever decision the Empire made about its future. President Boram received reports that the Vorthak leadership was requesting time to consult with their home government before making any decisions about how to respond to human revelations. She approved a 48-hour pause in demonstrations while the aliens contacted their capital world and explained the situation to their supreme leaders. Captain So Young used this pause to take Vorthak officers on tours of human facilities that had been disguised as primitive installations on Earth. The aliens were shocked to discover that every major human city was actually the visible portion of vast underground complexes that housed millions of people and contained technology that was centuries ahead of anything they had imagined possible. The Vorthak officers learned that Earth's population was actually much larger than their sensors had detected because most humans lived in underground cities that were invisible to orbital surveillance. They learned that Earth's defensive capabilities included weapons that could destroy entire fleets without leaving any trace of what had happened to them. Most disturbing of all, they learned that the human ships and weapons they had encountered during their battle were considered obsolete by human standards. The technology they had seen demonstrated was from human military reserves that had been in storage for decades. Current human military capabilities were classified at levels that required special permission, even for allied species, to learn about engineer. Wujin showed the Vorthak officers manufacturing facilities that could produce warships the size of small moons within a matter of days. He showed them research laboratories where human scientists were developing technologies that would allow them to create or destroy entire star systems if they chose to do so. The Vorthak officers asked why humans had developed such overwhelming capabilities if they preferred peaceful solutions to conflicts. Wu Jin explained that humans had learned through bitter experience that the best way to ensure peace was to be so powerful that no one would consider challenging them. The Vorthak home government received their fleet commander's reports and immediately declared them to be lies or hallucinations caused by human psychological weapons. Supreme Leader Zeth Mar announced that no primitive species could possibly possess the capabilities that their commander was describing. He ordered the fleet to resume their attack on Earth and to ignore any further human attempts at deception. Admiral Day-Wan received this message through the Human Intelligence Network that had been monitoring Vorthak communications for 2 centuries. He forwarded the message to the Council of Worlds where representatives from all 47 human star systems would vote on how to respond to Vorthak refusal to accept peaceful resolution. Dr. He-Jin was not surprised that the Vorthak leadership had rejected evidence of human capabilities because her psychological profiles had predicted exactly this response. Species that built their identity around military superiority often could not accept information that contradicted their worldview. She had seen this pattern in 11 previous cases. The Council of Worlds took exactly 37 minutes to reach a unanimous decision about how to proceed with the Vorthak situation. Chancellor Eun-jung sent the authorization codes to Earth, along with instructions for implementing what humans called the Final Warning Protocol. This protocol had been used only twice before in human history, and both previous applications had been successful. President Boram received the authorization codes and felt the weight of responsibility that came with ending the pretense that had protected galactic peace for so many centuries. She knew that once humans revealed their true nature, there would be no going back to the comfortable fiction that Earth was just another primitive world. General Tai-hyun activated command systems that had been waiting in standby mode for 300 years. Deep beneath the surface of Earth and dozens of other human worlds, machines that could reshape reality itself began to power up for the first time since they had been built. The energy signatures from these machines would be visible to any species. With sufficiently advanced sensors anywhere in the galaxy, Captain So Young received orders to prepare her squadron for revealing their ship's true capabilities to the Vorthak fleet. Until now, they had been using less than 1% of their actual power in order to maintain the illusion that human technology was primitive. Today, they would show the aliens what human fighters could really do. Commander Sung-min was given permission to demonstrate human mastery over space and time by opening a portal that would allow the Vorthak to see directly into their own home system from Earth's location. The portal technology was considered one of humanity's most carefully guarded secrets because it represented the kind of power that could destabilize entire civilizations if it fell into the wrong hands. Engineer Wu Jin activated the first phase, of Earth's defensive transformation by allowing the planet's artificial gravity generators to become visible to alien sensors. The Vorthak fleet suddenly detected massive energy sources distributed throughout Earth's crust that were producing gravitational fields strong enough to hold the planet together even if its core stopped functioning. The aliens realized that Earth was not a natural world at all, but an artificial construct that had been built by a species with godlike technological capabilities. Every mountain and ocean and continent had been carefully designed and positioned to create the illusion of a normal planet while hiding the true nature of human civilization. Dr. Hijin sent the final warning message to the Vorthak fleet on all frequencies simultaneously. The message was broadcast in perfect Vorthak language, with grammar and vocabulary that demonstrated complete mastery of their culture and psychology. The message was also sent directly into the brain of every Vorthak crew member through neural interfaces that the aliens had not known existed. The message was simple and clear. Earth's last warning. Stop attack or we stop pretending to be polite. Followed by a countdown timer showing exactly 60 minutes until humans would reveal the full extent of their capabilities to the Galaxy Ambassador Kyung-Soo, opened communications with the Vorthak commander, and explained exactly what would happen when the countdown reached 0. He said that humans would stop maintaining the fiction that they were a primitive species and would begin operating openly as the galactic superpower they had always been. The ambassador explained that this would involve revealing human military installations in every star system in the galaxy. It would involve human warships emerging from dimensional hiding places where they had been waiting for centuries. It would involve the activation of weapons systems that could destroy entire stellar regions if humans felt threatened. Most importantly, it would involve the end of human protection for species that had been quietly benefiting from human intervention without knowing it. The ambassador explained that dozens of civilizations existed only because humans had been secretly preventing stronger species from conquering them. Admiral Daewon began the first phase of revelation by allowing human observation posts throughout the galaxy to become visible to any species with the technology to detect them. Within minutes, governments on hundreds of worlds received reports that massive unknown installations had suddenly appeared in their star systems. The installations had been there all along, but had been hidden by technology that bent light and gravity around them. Now they stood revealed as monuments to human engineering capability that dwarfed anything that other species had ever built. Each installation was larger than most space stations and contained enough firepower to defend entire star systems. General Taehyun activated the second phase by opening dimensional portals that allowed human warships to emerge from parallel space, where they had been stationed for decades. The ships that appeared were not like anything the Vorthak had ever seen, because they operated on principles that alien science insisted were impossible. The human warships were built from materials that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Their weapons could fire through time as well as space. Their engines could move them instantly between any 2 points in the galaxy. Their defensive systems could make them exist and not exist at the same time depending on whether it was tactically advantageous. Captain So Young led her squadron in a demonstration of human fighters operating at full capability instead of the reduced power levels they had been using during their earlier encounter. The 12 human ships suddenly occupied multiple positions in space simultaneously while firing weapons that reached backward through time to destroy Vorthak missiles. Before they had been launched, Commander Sung Min opened a portal that showed the Vorthak fleet exactly what was happening in their home star system at that exact moment. The aliens could see their capital world surrounded by human ships that had appeared from nowhere. They could see their defensive fleets being politely but firmly escorted away from their own planet by human forces. The portal also showed Vorthak government officials being invited to emergency meetings with human diplomatic representatives who had been living on their world for 50 years without being detected. The officials were learning that their every decision and every secret had been known to humans for generations. Engineer Wu Jin demonstrated human control over fundamental forces by temporarily adjusting the rate of time flow around the Vorthak fleet. The aliens experienced 5 minutes of normal time while the rest of the galaxy experienced 1 hour. During this demonstration, they could watch stars move visibly in the sky and see human ships performing maneuvers that took advantage of the Time differential Dr. Hyejin monitored Vorthak's psychological responses to these revelations and noted that several crew members were showing signs of complete mental breakdown. She recommended that the demonstrations be scaled back to prevent permanent psychological damage to alien personnel who were not responsible for their government's decisions. The Vorthak commander sent increasingly desperate messages to his home government describing what he was witnessing but received no responses because his government was busy dealing with human representatives who had appeared in their Capitol building without warning. The supreme leaders were learning that their empire existed only because humans had allowed it to exist. President Boram received reports that Vorthak resistance was crumbling throughout their empire as human forces revealed themselves on every world the aliens had conquered. The conquered species were learning that humans had been secretly supporting their resistance movements for decades and were now prepared to help them regain their freedom. Ambassador Kyung-soo informed the Vorthak commander that his government had exactly 15 minutes remaining to make a decision about their empire's future. He explained that humans would prefer to integrate the Vorthak into the existing galactic community as a peaceful member species, but were prepared to remove them entirely if they continued to pose a threat. The ambassador showed the Vorthak commander detailed plans for both options. Integration would involve the dismantling of Vorthak military forces and the establishment of human oversight for their government until they learned to coexist peacefully with other species. Removal would involve the relocation of all Vorthak citizens to a quarantine system where they could develop their civilization without threatening anyone else. Commander Sungmin personally escorted the Vorthak flagship to Earth, using his single fighter craft to demonstrate that one human pilot could control the movement of their largest warship. The alien crew watched in amazement as their ship's navigation systems obeyed commands from the small human vessel instead of from their own bridge. They had never imagined that such precise control over another ship's systems was possible. The Vorthak commander found himself sitting in a conference room aboard a human station that had appeared around Earth while he was watching. The station was larger than his entire fleet and contained technology that made his species' most advanced equipment look like children's toys. Everything in the room seemed to anticipate his needs before he expressed them. Ambassador Kyung-soo sat across from the Vorthak commander and explained the terms that humans were prepared to offer for ending this conflict peacefully. The ambassador spoke in a calm and patient voice that reminded the alien of his grandfather telling stories to children. There was no anger or hatred in the human's manner, despite everything the Vorthak had attempted to do to Earth. The terms were simple and fair, but would require fundamental changes in how Vorthak civilization operated. All military forces would be disbanded except for small defensive units that could protect individual worlds from natural disasters or accidents. All conquered worlds would be returned to their original inhabitants with human assistance for rebuilding what had been destroyed. The Vorthak Empire would become the Vorthak Federation and would be governed by elected representatives from all member worlds, including the species they had previously conquered. Human advisors would help establish new governmental systems based on cooperation instead of domination. These advisors would remain until the new federation proved it could function peacefully. President Boram met with representatives from the 17 species that the Vorthak had conquered over the past century. These species had been contacted by human diplomatic teams and offered assistance in rebuilding their civilizations. Most of them had never known that humans existed, but were grateful for any help they could receive. The representatives were amazed to learn that humans had been secretly monitoring their situations during Vorthak occupation and had detailed records of everything that had happened to their people. Human intelligence services had documented every crime and every act of resistance. Human medical teams were prepared to treat injuries and trauma that Vorthak occupation had caused. Dr. Hyejin presented her analysis of Vorthak psychology to the Integration Planning Committee. She explained that the species suffered from a cultural disorder that made them unable to see other species as equals. This disorder could be treated through education and exposure to diverse galactic cultures, but would require several generations to cure completely. The doctor recommended that young Vorthak be given opportunities to live and study among other species so they could learn that intelligence and creativity existed in many different forms. She also recommended that Vorthak adults be given therapy to help them overcome the supremacist attitudes that their culture had taught them. General Tai Hyun oversaw the systematic dismantling of Vorthak military installations throughout their former empire. Human engineering teams worked alongside Vorthak technicians to convert weapons factories into manufacturing centers for civilian goods. Warships were refitted as cargo vessels or research platforms or passenger transports. The general was impressed by how quickly Vorthak engineers adapted to working with human technology once they abandoned their assumptions about what was possible. Many of them showed genuine enthusiasm for learning about sciences that their culture had never explored, because those sciences were not useful for military conquest. Captain So Young led teams of human pilots who were training Vorthak crews to operate the civilian vessels that would replace their military fleet. The training was challenging because Vorthak had spent centuries thinking of space travel only in terms of moving weapons and soldiers from one place to another. So Young found that Vorthak pilots were actually quite skilled once they learned to think of their ships as tools for exploration and trade instead of instruments of war. Several of them expressed interest in joining human exploration missions to parts of the galaxy that no one had ever visited. Engineer Wu Jin worked with Vorthak scientists to help them understand the technologies that humans were sharing with their species. The sharing was carefully controlled because some human technologies were too dangerous for species that had not learned to use them responsibly. Wu Jin was surprised by how quickly Vorthak scientists grasped concepts that had taken humans centuries to develop. He realized that their species had always possessed the intelligence needed for advanced science, but had focused all their efforts on military applications. Instead of peaceful research, Admiral Daewon received reports from human observers throughout the galaxy who were monitoring reactions to the revelation of human capabilities. Most species were relieved to learn that a powerful force had been protecting galactic peace, even though they had not known it. A few species were frightened by the implications of human power, but none showed any inclination to challenge it. The Admiral noted that several species had requested formal diplomatic relations with humanity now that humans were operating openly instead of secretly. These requests would need to be carefully evaluated, because humans preferred to maintain some distance from galactic politics whenever possible. Commander Sung Min was assigned to escort Vorthak diplomatic missions to worlds they had previously conquered so they could apologize to the species they had harmed and offer to make reparations for the damage they had caused. These missions were difficult because many conquered species were understandably angry about their treatment. Sungmin found that most species were willing to forgive the Vorthak once they saw evidence that the Empire was genuinely committed to changing its behavior. The presence of human observers at these meetings helped convince everyone that the changes were real and permanent. Dr. Hae Jin established counseling programs for both Vorthak citizens and members of conquered species who needed help recovering from the trauma of military occupation. The programs used therapeutic techniques that humans had developed over centuries of helping species cope with the aftermath of conflicts. The doctor was pleased to see that Vorthak and their former victims could work together peacefully once they had opportunities to see each other as individuals instead of as enemies. Many friendships developed between people who had been separated by artificial barriers created by imperial policies. Ambassador Kyung-soo opened the first session of the Galactic Peace Council, where representatives from over 100 species met to discuss establishing formal structures for preventing future conflicts. The Council would create mechanisms for resolving disputes peacefully and for coordinating responses to species that threatened galactic stability. The ambassador explained that humans would participate in the Council as equals rather than as leaders, because the goal was to create a system where all species could contribute to maintaining peace according to their abilities and interests. President Bo-ram addressed the Galactic Peace Council during its opening ceremony and explained why humans had chosen to reveal themselves after so many centuries of operating in secret. She said that the galaxy had reached a point where peaceful species needed to work together openly to prevent aggressive species from destabilizing entire regions. Bo-ram announced that Earth would serve as a neutral meeting place where species could gather to discuss their differences without fear of attack. Human defensive capabilities would protect any species that came to Earth with peaceful intentions, regardless of what conflicts they might have with other species. General Tai Hyun began the process of returning human military forces to their hidden positions throughout the galaxy. Most human installations would remain visible to species that had demonstrated peaceful intentions, but would be concealed from any species that might pose future threats. The general established new protocols for human intervention in galactic conflicts based on lessons learned from the Vorthak situation. Future interventions would begin with diplomatic contact, rather than allowing aggressive species to attack human interests before revealing human capabilities. Engineer Wu Jin led a team that was developing new technologies for monitoring galactic communications and detecting species that might be developing aggressive tendencies before they became serious threats. The new systems would allow humans to provide guidance and assistance to troubled species before their problems escalated into conflicts. Admiral Day-Wan received the final reports from human teams that had been working to integrate former Vorthak worlds into the galactic community. The integration was proceeding more smoothly than anyone had expected, because most Vorthak citizens were relieved to be free from the burden of maintaining a military empire. Dr. Ye Jin published her comprehensive study of the Vorthak transformation as a guide for helping other aggressive species learn to coexist peacefully with their neighbors. The study would be shared with any species that requested assistance in resolving their own conflicts.